Have you ever wondered how a simple cup of coffee changed the course of human history? Not just your morning routine, but entire revolutions, scientific breakthroughs, and cultural movements? I'm talking about coffee houses, those spaces that have been far more than just places to grab caffeine. They've been incubators of radical thought, catalysts for social change, and the birthplace of ideas that have shaped our modern world in ways most people never realize. Today, we're diving into the rich, complex, and often overlooked history of coffee houses and their profound impact on society. What you'll discover might change how you view that local cafe on your street corner. I promise, by the end of this video, you'll understand why these seemingly ordinary establishments have been called penny universities and why governments throughout history have feared them enough to try shutting them down. The story begins in the Islamic world, specifically in the cities of Mecca, Cairo, and Constantinople during the 15th and 16th centuries. Unlike the taverns and alehouses of Europe, these early coffee houses were spaces where people could gather without alcohol, creating something revolutionary, a sober, intellectual social space. The Arab world called these establishments kave khana, and they quickly became hubs for chess playing, music, storytelling, and most importantly, conversation. What made these spaces truly revolutionary wasn't just the stimulating effects of caffeine, but rather the social mixing they facilitated. In traditional Islamic societies with rigid hierarchies, coffee houses became rare spaces where men from different social classes could interact as equals over a cup of the dark, bitter brew. Merchants and scholars, artisans and religious students all found themselves engaged in discussions that would have been impossible elsewhere. The Ottoman authorities quickly recognized the potential danger. When people of different backgrounds gather and freely exchange ideas, power structures get questioned. Sultan Murad IV was so concerned about the seditious talk in coffee houses that he instituted the death penalty for coffee consumption in the 1630s. Think about that next time you complain about the price of your latte. People once risked execution for the privilege. When coffee made its way to Europe in the 17th century, it brought this revolutionary social model with it. The first European coffee house opened in Venice in 1645, and by the 1650s, they had spread to England. London's first opened in 1652, and within decades, there were hundreds. These weren't just places to drink, they were the internet of their day, where news was shared, debate flourished, and information spread. Before I continue with how European coffee houses transformed Western society, if you're finding this journey through coffee's hidden influence fascinating, make sure you subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell. I explore these kinds of overlooked historical influences regularly, diving into the stories that connect our daily experiences to world-changing movements. Subscribing ensures you won't miss these perspectives that help us see our world with fresh eyes. Now, let's continue with what might be the most extraordinary example of coffee houses changing the course of history, London in the late 17th and 18th centuries, the period now known as the Enlightenment. These weren't just casual meeting spots, they were the engines of scientific and intellectual revolution. Consider Lloyd's Coffee House, which began as a simple meeting place for merchants and ship captains to exchange information about shipping news and maritime insurance. Today, it exists as Lloyd's of London, one of the world's most powerful insurance markets. Or Jonathan's and Garraway's coffee houses, which evolved into what we now know as the London Stock Exchange. Perhaps most remarkably, the Royal Society, Britain's pioneering scientific academy, grew directly out of conversations at the Grecian Coffee House. Isaac Newton and Edmund Halley would demonstrate experiments between sips of coffee, while other patrons debated everything from optics to gravity. The scientific method itself was shaped by the coffee house environment, where claims had to be demonstrated publicly and withstand criticism from an informed audience. Each London coffee house developed its own character and clientele. Writers gathered at Will's Coffee House, where John Dragon held court. Politicians frequented St. James' Coffee House. The Cocoa Tree became a hub for Tory politicians, while Whigs gathered at St. James's. These weren't just social divisions, They represented the beginning of our modern political party system, with coffeehouses functioning as informal headquarters for different political factions. What made coffeehouses truly revolutionary was their accessibility. For the price of a penny, the cost of a cup of coffee, anyone decently dressed could enter, regardless of social class. This earned them the nickname petty universities, as the education one could receive through conversation there rivaled formal education, which remained restricted to the elite. Newspapers were born in this environment. The first were simply handwritten sheets of paper circulated in coffeehouses. Eventually, the Spectator and the Tatler emerged specifically to be read in coffeehouses, creating the model for modern journalism. Joseph Addison and Richard Steele, who founded these publications, explicitly stated their purpose was to bring the conversation of the coffeehouse to those who couldn't attend in person. Across the channel in France, coffeehouses, or cafés, played an equally transformative role, but with a distinctly French character. The Café Procope, established in 1686, became the gathering place for Enlightenment philosophers like Voltaire, Rousseau, and Diderot. It was there that many of the ideas that would later fuel the French Revolution were first articulated and refined. Liberty, equality, fraternity, these weren't just slogans, but concepts debated over coffee before they became battle cries on the streets. The political nature of cafés became so pronounced that by the late 18th century, the police routinely stationed spies in Parisian cafés to monitor potential revolutionary activity. They were right to be concerned. The French Revolution was partly planned in the Café du Foy, where Camille Desmoulins famously jumped on a table in 1789 and called citizens to arms against the monarchy. In Vienna, coffeehouses developed a distinctive culture that combined elements of a living room, dining room, office, and social club. With their marble-top tables, bentwood chairs, and newspaper racks, Viennese coffeehouses became institutions so central to intellectual life that writers like Peter Altenburg actually lived in them, having their mail delivered to their favorite establishment. The American coffeehouses followed a different trajectory, but were no less influential. In colonial America, coffeehouses like Boston's Green Dragon were meeting places for revolutionaries. The Boston Tea Party, that pivotal event in American independence, was planned at the Green Dragon. After the merchant William Molyneux announced, "Boston Harbor teapot tonight," the men marched from the coffeehouse to the harbor to dump British tea into the water. By the 19th century, the character of coffeehouses began to change with industrialization and urbanization. The cafe culture remained strong in Europe, but in America, coffeehouses gradually gave way to diners and fast food. The social mixing declined as establishments increasingly catered to specific demographics. The 20th century saw another transformation with the rise of corporate coffee chains. When Starbucks expanded in the 1990s, it deliberately invoked the historical role of coffeehouses as third places, neither home nor work, but community spaces. Yet critics have pointed out that with their controlled environments and predictable experiences, modern chains lack the spontaneity and democratic character that made historical coffeehouses such powerful social forces. Today, we're witnessing yet another evolution of coffee culture. Independent coffeehouses have re-emerged as community hubs. Digital nomads with laptops have replaced the pamphleteers and philosophical debaters of earlier eras. The coffeehouse has become a workplace as much as a social space, reflecting our changing relationship with work itself. What remains constant is the underlying social function. Coffeehouses still serve as spaces where people can gather, exchange ideas, and form connections outside traditional social structures. They remain one of the few public spaces where you can linger without spending much money, making them uniquely accessible in an increasingly privatized urban landscape. Before we wrap up, I want to ask you to take a moment to like this video if you've gained a new perspective on those coffee shops you pass every day. Your engagement helps others discover this kind of content that connects our everyday experiences to broader historical patterns. And I'd love to hear in the comments below, has a conversation in a coffee house ever changed your perspective or led to an important connection in your life? Share your experiences. I read every comment. Also, check the description for ways you can support the channel directly if you value these deeper explorations of history's hidden influences. The next time you sit down with a cup of coffee, take a moment to appreciate that you're participating in a tradition that has shaped nations, sparked revolutions, birthed scientific discoveries, and created financial systems. From the Arab world to Europe, from colonial America to today's global coffee culture, the humble coffee house has been much more than a place to satisfy a caffeine craving. It has been a crucible for human connection and radical thought. In a world increasingly dominated by digital interaction, there's something profoundly valuable about these physical spaces where ideas can collide in unexpected ways. Perhaps that's the most important legacy of coffeehouse culture, the recognition that some of humanity's greatest achievements have emerged not from isolated genius, but from the creative friction of diverse minds gathering in a shared space, stimulated by conversation and, of course, a good cup of coffee.